Hello dear students, today I am going to discuss an 18th century English poem, Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard. Thomas Gray is considered one of the most important poets of the 18th century. He was associated with a loosely formed group known as the graveyard poets. Also called sometimes churchyard poets, they chose death for their subjects in poetry. Let's see who were these poets.
The graveyard poets and the graveyard school of poetry are terms applied to a loose group of poets of the 18th century. They wrote meditative poems on themes like death, loss, and mourning. The forming of such a group can be regarded as a reaction to the restraints of neoclassicism, as unlike their neoclassical contemporaries, the graveyard poets emphasized subjectivity, mystery, and melancholy in their poems. Their poetry dealt with subjects of death, mortality, and gloom, which were often actually set in graveyards. Their poetry is often called the precursor of the Gothic genre as well as the Romantic movement of the 19th century. Some of the important graveyard poets were Thomas Parnell, Edward Young, Robert Blair, and Thomas Gray. Now let's know the poem. Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard is one of the best known poems written in English. It is also a fine example of a classic graveyard poem, as the poem concentrates on the inevitability of human mortality. It commends the simple life of the poor. It focuses on the egalitarian nature of death to which succumbs every human being irrespective of class. The speaker in the poem wishes to be remembered as a man of humble birth who was generous and was a stranger to glory and fame in his life. Now I will give an analysis of the entire poem. The opening of the poem is very significant as it creates a gloomy environment which suits the mood of the poem. In the first three stanzas, snapshots of the evening are captured. The day comes to an end and everything is enveloped in darkness. Pictures of the curfew tolling the knell, the cattle and the ploughman returning home after a busy day in the field, and the old becoming active are suggestive of death. It is in the fourth stanza of the poem that the poet refers to the graveyard and the dead. The speaker mentions the dead who have been sleeping under the elm and yew trees. In the next three stanzas, he talks about the earthly pleasures that the dead can no longer have or respond to. They include the joys of the village life, such as the warmth of the hearth and the love and care of wife and children. The speaker also mentions the pleasure that a farmer can have in the fields while farming. In the eighth stanza, the speaker says that the simple life of the poor should not be looked down upon by those who have achieved glory in life. In the next three stanzas, the poet discusses the egalitarian nature of death, that it does not spare anyone, no matter how powerful or wealthy he may be. The speaker says that honor, power, beauty, and wealth cannot prevent death. No show of wealth can bring a dead man back to life. Therefore, if the tombstones of those villagers do not mention any trophies or achievements, that should not be laughed at. He comments that glory of honor, power, beauty, and wealth are not things to boast of, as everyone must die one day. In these stanzas, the speaker talks about the possibilities that the poor people could have shown in their lives had they been provided with proper environment and opportunities. He discusses the causes behind the simple lives of those people and their not being able to achieve glory in life. It was nothing but poverty and a lack of education. If they could get the resources, these people too could achieve glory and be famous. If given the chance, these people could achieve greatness and wealth. Among them also, one would see great politicians like John Hampden, poets like John Milton, or leaders like Oliver Cromwell. In these stanzas, the speaker shows two sides of this unprivileged state of the poor. The speaker notes that if poverty prevented the village people from achieving greatness or the virtues, it also prevented them from committing crimes. There were other virtues to acquire in their lives. Unlike many famous people, they never had to sacrifice their conscience and artistic talent to luxury. Far from the madding crowd, these people were having noble and peaceful lives. In the village graveyard, one can see the modest memorials. The speaker observes that there was no mention of any great achievement in the tombstones of these village people. These people too deserve homage, and the speaker thinks that any passerby can express his tribute to these dead people with a sigh. Although there were no elaborate elegies written, yet they show that through their holy lives they teach others to accept death. The term rustic moralist may refer to anyone who contemplates death, and in this case, it is the speaker himself. In these stanzas, the speaker talks about the desire of the villagers both when they were alive and after. Since they will be forgotten after their death, the village people want to linger in their lives although it is full of worries. In this case, one can see that in the face of death, even the worries of life are more pleasurable. After their death, they live in our memories and they desire for that from their graves. In this stanza, the speaker refers to himself. He calls himself mindful of the dead people who were not honored by the others. He wishes that when he dies, some kindred spirit will be mindful of him too and will remember him. In these 5 stanzas, the speaker imagines how a peasant will remember him after his death. He imagines that people know him as a simple soul without any glory in his life. He wants people to remember him as a man who lived a very simple life in midst of nature. The last 3 stanzas of the poem compose an epitaph. The speaker writes his own epitaph. He wants people to remember him as someone who had a humble birth and that he was unknown to glory and fame. The speaker thinks of himself as a generous soul as he is mindful of the dead. He wishes that after his death, he also gets somebody who is mindful of him. That is his only desire after death. The speaker tells us that he does not wish that people talk about his merits and frailties after his death, as these are things that should be left to the care of God. With his wishes, the poem comes to an end. Now let's know the important themes in the poem. As we know, the prime concern in graveyard poetry is the subject of death. In Elegy written in a country churchyard also, death is the major theme. 2 important themes in the poem are death and mortality and society and class. Death and mortality. Death is the ultimate truth and it comes equally to everyone. Neither glory nor fame can prevent death from devouring human lives. Every path in life, glorious or simple, leads to death. The speaker therefore contemplates the nature of death and learns to accept it. He believes that every dead person, whether great or ordinary, deserves homage. Society and class. Both the rich and the poor are mortals, and therefore the latter is not less worthy. The poor have their simple joys and pleasures in life, and they are worthy to be remembered after their death. Poverty and lack of proper education create the stratification in the society, and the poor remain unprivileged. The speaker is of the opinion that since it is the circumstances that prevent the poor from achieving glory in life, their simple lives should not be mocked at. Instead, one should be mindful of their death and should pay them homage.
Dear students, that was a brief analysis of Gray's poem, Elegy written in a country churchyard. I hope that this video will help you in understanding the poem. Thank you all.